and good morning, Deborah. Good to see you. Let's see. Do we got anybody in the chat? Deb, good to see you. Let's get started here then. Get right into it. All right, so here is the video, guys. It's over for game developers. All their expertise and coding knowledge, that's a thing of the past. That is a thing of the past. This is actually shared to me by XRunner. Shout out to him. He added me saying something like, coding's overrated, creativity is the currency. And now let's watch this video and you can see what's being talked about here.
Okay, so Grok 3 is unbelievable. I'm going to show you a really cool workflow of using deep search and think to build unbelievable stuff with one prompt. I just one-shotted this Grand Theft Auto clone where I can walk around, steal cars, and then drive the cars around and run over people. This was all done with Grok and deep search. This is actually pretty amazing. I've tried this out on other AIs and it didn't work. Let me show you how I did it. So this is really, really cool. This was all done in basically 2 prompts, 1 to deep search, 1 to think. And you can do this right now. So do this along with me. These prompts were inspired from Cristiano Giardina, who did a really cool prompt just like this, but I decided to do it slightly different. Write a P5.js. So that is a gaming JavaScript framework, really easy to implement. I'll show you the website. You can put it in a second. Write a P5.js implementation of Grand Theft Auto. It must be extremely polished, and I want you to build all the sprites and assets yourself. I don't want you to import any assets. So basically what this is doing, and I use deep search for this, so you do deep search when you run this prompt. Basically what this will do is go on the internet, do a bunch of research, figure out what Grand Theft Auto is, figure out how it could build it on its own, and then come up with an entire game plan for building it. So where to put the cars, where to put the people, how the people move, how to hijack the cars, where to move them around, what the controls should be. It's just going to do a whole bunch of research on how to build this game. Then it's going to build out this entire plan on game mechanics and details and how it's all going to work. And then you follow it up with one more prompt, which is now create a code block with the entire correct code, please. Hit enter on that. It takes the plan that deep search just built, and you're doing that on think. So the second prompt is think. So it takes the first prompt all from deep search, then you do it in think, and you say, build me the code, and then it gives you the entire code, right? You click copy on the code.
That's it. The entire code right there.
You go to editor.p5js.org, you paste in the code, then you hit play, and you got a working game, good to go. And you go and you can just start playing the game. Whatever game, and this doesn't have to be with just Grand Theft Auto. You can think of any idea you want, right? You can do like a Mario game, a Tetris game, anything you want. Or you can even do like the ones they did in the demo where you combine 2 games. Like I wonder what would happen if I combine like Grand Theft Auto and Tetris. What would come out?
Whoa.
You can do this right now just with your Grok 3 subscription. So
sky's the limit.
Really important here, deep search and think. If you use these 2 together in the right way, where you do deep search to kind of send your agent out and do research for you and come up with a plan, and then you use think to kind of put the plan together, you can build some unbelievably powerful things. I'll put both of these prompts below.
Unbelievably
Shout out Cristiano Giardina for a lot of the inspiration there as well. This is pretty amazing. Hit the like button below if you learned anything. Hit retweet if you want to be my best.
No thanks. So this is the idea behind it. Using Grok, deep search to research it, then think implements the code. I thought to myself, you know what? Instead of Grand Theft Auto, why not make Toho? Why not make a Toho clone or Toho game? So that's what I did. I asked Grok to do research on a Toho game, and then I had Think make it for me. So, and then put out the code, and here's what I got here. Here's what it looks like. Let me just make sure that shows up on my screen here. Yeah, that looks good. So, here is the results. We've got my character here. I can control it with WADs. It's flying. It has 3 enemies. I'm shooting out little bullets here on the screen. Boom. The bullets have collision. If I hit him, I'll die. Boss health 100, has it in the corner here. This is where the where Grok screws up, because the boss is supposed to be shooting 3 different types of patterns, but it is not. It is not shooting 3 different types of patterns. It's doing nothing. But the boss health goes down as I shoot it, and stage cleared. Boom. I can also die. Let me see if I can actually die here. Could be a little hard. Oh no, I could. It's a little hard to die because there's not a lot of bullets being shot at me. So not a lot of bullets. Hey, X-Runner, good morning. We were just talking about that video you sent me with the Grok. We're showing off Grok 3's coding skills here. So anyway, like this is what it implemented. It's not quite a bullet hell, in my opinion, but it works. It functions basically. So I started like looking into the code, and I mean, I haven't coded in like 20 years here. I do have some experience with JavaScript, but not P5. Like I said, it's been 20 years. I don't remember a damn thing about it. Except like maybe like the basic logic here, like, you know, if statements, and then like, okay, it's in the brackets, and that's what happens in the if statement, and blah blah blah. That kind of stuff. I have a curious idea. So like, I basically almost had to kind of reverse engineer where I saw the statement, oh, this works. Let me like fiddle with the variables and see what works and what doesn't. And you can ask Grok, say like, hey, Grok, this code right here isn't working. Could you, let me see, can I pop this out more so you can see it? Let me move this to the center. Like, Grok, like this stuff's not working because it has, apparently what it did, like it has the code for, and I apologize, Deborah, or anybody that doesn't know coding, this is probably, I mean, it's almost incomprehensible to me too, if I haven't spent like 8 hours looking at it. So like these are the patterns. It puts it in like an array, and the idea right here in this update thing is that it's supposed to call these different patterns. Hey, good morning, Silver Bishop. It's supposed to call this pattern from this pattern index, and then the boss like does it. But that did not seem to work, and even after like acting Grok, hey Grok, it's not working, and it would suggest stuff like, oh yeah, it's do this and do that, and unfortunately, even when I asked like, hey, do some new stuff, it would make like new code, but like it rewrite. There's different class. There's like a class for bullets, and it would rewrite it. So like velocity, but it like replaced velocity with something else. So that meant that all the other places that like velocity is used don't work again. But it doesn't like tell you exactly like, hey, replace all of this, or like doesn't just replace the entire code for you. And maybe that's an issue with my prompting skills. Though, I mean, in my mind, AI, like, hey, it was supposed to be like able to the goal of AI is just like, hey, do this, and it does it for you, not create more problems, more new problems for you. So, but anyway, let me show you my this is my version after, well, I was still experimenting up to the point, so some of this stuff is a little weird. But this is my version of AI Toho here after all my work. I don't know if the colors might be a little incomprehensible. If the blue color might be incomprehensible. This guy, I added another enemy type who shoots homing ones, and like this has got a different, the boss here has a different functions here. So like, and it does switch. We got it working here. So this is looking more like a bullet hell. And I have to like pretty intense. Oh, I love this. I love this spiral pattern. It's one of my favorite patterns here. I see, like, this looks like a traditional bullet hell. I gave myself like 20 lives, so if I had 3 lives, I would have already died. It's a little bit hard to see on this, it's a little hard to see on this, screen. It's a little small. And the bullets are a little small, but boom, stage cleared. Hey, Ryan, good to see you, man. And that's it. So, I mean, it works. That's the thing, it works. I mean, it took me a ton of time, and, like, I had to, like, look over and start to... I had to, like, you know, look over, like, by the end of it, I kind of understood what each of these, you know, functions do. And I have to wonder if, well, I don't know, I doubt it'd be better off just, like, learning it from the ground up, having the AI actually put in these, let me try again. Let me bring this code over so visually you can see it, not that, like, bringing all this stuff over, like it where it says like draw everything, and it draws the background, it like the collision stuff, it removes off-screen bullets, you know, it has, you know, collision detection for the enemy bullet versus the player, and the player bullets versus the boss and the enemies. But, you know, for the enemy to add another enemy, I just like copy and pasted this enemy script and made like enemy 2 instead of enemy, which worked surprisingly. Less code I have to write, the better. Learning code from AI is like learning from a guy who was in a country for years as an illegal immigrant. But, I mean, this code looks pretty clean in my opinion, though I'm not a programmer, so it's not like complete gobbledygook. And the fact that it puts in like little notes like this, like, ooh, this is collision detection. This is where, you know, the player versus the enemy. The fact that it put in little notes is actually pretty nice. So I could kind of tell, like, draw, like, where it draws the UI, the player class, the, you know, enemy class. So I was able to, like, change the bullets too, and the bullet speed if I wanted to. Now I, like, changed the angle to make it a little bit tighter, because of course I ended up changing the canvas size to a more narrow canvas size, which is traditionally shmup. But it's actually a lot of fun to do this, because you could see how different the game plays when it's a 4x3. No, yeah, as opposed to a 3x4. You know, if you know when you change the aspect ratio from horizontal to, oh god, get out of here, fake Red Hawk. Bye-bye. Yes, remove. All right. When you change that aspect ratio, how much, like, even if the patterns don't change, the gameplay changes dramatically. You know, how the bullets, like in this, how like the circular bullets, you know, spread, because the circular bullets have more time to spread out, so it's less congestive. And it, you know, sort of gives a chance for you know, some more gaps in the gameplay. That's the problem fortunately with the homing bullets. They stay on screen, so like sometimes they'll come back on the screen, which is kind of funny. I don't particularly like it, because it's like they're supposed to be gone. Like, I want stuff to like curve at you a little bit, but not like crazy amounts. I really like this pattern. It just looks great. Like, oh yeah, this is a bullet hell. But it does have the basics down, which is kind of cool. Of course, you know, it's just, you know, circles and dots. I don't think this is going to replace game developers anytime soon, but it is a cool idea. And it is a game. It is a game. Is that real, Chat of Arabia? Oh, wow. You joined 23 hours ago. Okay, you're gone. It's a game, you know. It's a functional game. It has an objective. It has enemies. So I mean, that part is pretty cool. I don't know, but I don't know exactly how this is gonna change the world. But you could kind of see, it is kind of amazing the fact that it was able to make a game, or at least, you know, the basics of a game. And if it could have gotten the boss array right the first time, uh, then you can then it would actually have been pretty good. Of course, I'm actually really surprised that it made the canvas this size. Like, why didn't it make the canvas vertical to begin with? If it did all this research on what a shmup is, how do you not get the aspect ratio right? Reminds me of the coding I did back at grammar school in C+. Heck yeah. It is fairly basic code, but it's pretty fun. Pretty fun. It actually kind of interesting from like a, I don't know, educational or like perspective to like change the variables and see, you know, how it changes the gameplay and the bullets. And all like I said, I didn't spend like 8 hours messing with stuff. It was a lot of fun. Like once you get into it, it's like, oh, well, like, you know, oh, maybe I can make, you know, these enemies shoot like 3 spread bullets that home on you, and maybe I make more enemies appear or less enemies appear. I didn't get around to try and figure out how to make the enemies move. That'd be kind of cool, but it was fun. It was fun. But overall, I don't know if it's, like I said, I'm not like, whoa, I could just make my own game with AI. I think that's still a ways away. But let's move on from this and let's go to the news. This was an article I love. I love the fact that journalists get so upset about Saudi Arabia. And I just want to preface this fact that Riot Games is owned by Tencent, which is a Chinese company. They have they've had their worlds in China several times, I believe. I mean, I remember I don't know if the first Worlds was in China or the second one, but you know, it's huge in China. It's owned by China. It's huge in China. China obviously isn't exactly friendly to, you know, they've got several human rights violations under their own belt, but apparently we really got to be uptight about Saudi Arabia because they're mean to a certain group that journalists care very deeply about. So let's read into this. A fat L for people who care about sports washing. And he'll explain what sports watching is because it sounds dumb. A recent town hall from the North American League of Legends Valorant, a broadcast hosted by Riot Games, which the developer previewed to the assembled casters and analysts, and its decision to enter a 3-year partnership with the Saudi-owned and run Esports World Cup raised major questions about the deal, and several attendees. Chief among those questions, first, how Riot intends to handle apparent Saudi interest in hosting a Valorant Game Changers event. Game Changers is a Valorant competitive circuit for women and marginalized genders, aka men pretending to be women. Saudi Arabia, meanwhile, is considered hostile to LGBTQ groups by reputable human rights groups, and women in the country are subjected to onerous legal restrictions. Though Game Changers will not be part of the 2025 Esports World Cup, Saudi interest in the event, in the form of an internal ESL Faceit group document listing, Game Changers expect to be part of the 2025 World Cup lineup, was first reported in the newsletter. So basically, like they're saying, like, oh yeah, you could do your thing, your women's and marginalized genders. I love the fact that they gave women their own like esports thing, but then said, you know what, a bunch of troons can join in and beat the shit out of you. It's fun. It is always fun to see men annihilate women. Because Riot did have an all women's group in their like ESL, and they just got annihilated. It was just a joke. It just totally blown out of the league. It was like as you would have expected. So basically, just blah blah blah. He's just this is such a fun question. Good morning, Jack. Also, whether talent will be penalized for speaking out or creating content critical of the Esports World Cup or Saudi Arabia. So if you remember a few weeks ago, I covered it, and maybe it was more than a month, that Riot Games was going to penalize or ban you if you said bad things, even on videos or streams covering League of Legends. But now oh man, what if you said bad stuff about Saudi Arabia? Are you going to punish us too? Riot representatives stressed that the broadcast talent will not be compelled to participate in the new partnership. Advertisements for basically what they said, like, no, we're not going to specifically do that. But there's kind of an unwritten rule that, hey, if you're representing us, maybe don't besmirch our partners and the people we're working with. They're still supposed to be professional. Talent had privately expressed their frustration and characterized the decision as driven by, greed. Whether and in what form the response comes remains to be seen. Where does he talk about sport washing? Maybe you're reading this, and what is sports washing and why do I GAF, which is give a fuck? Sports washing is a practice by which companies or states distract from internal controversies or bad behavior by investing in sports. This benefits them in several ways. A bad actor can effectively buy positive media coverage by hosting a successful sporting event or sponsoring a winning team. They also integrate over time into whatever sporting ecosystem they enter, make it harder to purge if they transgress. So basically, sometimes people we don't like do things that benefit society, and if they're beneficial, we have a harder time removing them from society. So we don't like that. It's difficult to isolate and punish bad actor if they own a soccer team, a golf league, or an airline. So you can't, get them out of the NBA, kick them out of the NBA ownership if they say that too many black people are attending their games. An airline or investing in dozens of major internal companies. So basically, they don't like Saudi Arabia. They also don't seem to have an issue with China for some reason. It's very bizarre, but very funny. I always like to see journalists like Mikhail Klemenov worried about things that have zero impact on anything. And of course, like I said, the backdrop of China owning them is pretty funny. And speaking of Saudi, well, Bloomberg, Niantic Inc. is in talks to sell its video game business to Saudi Arabia, controlled Scopely Incorporated, for about $3.5 billion. Damn, that is big money. A deal could be announced in the coming weeks. An agreement would involve Pokemon Go as well as other, but of course, if you're buying Niantic, you definitely want to get Pokemon Go. But, it hasn't been doing super well lately, but then, I think Niantic, as a developer, really isn't that good as in terms of making games. It's got really cool technology, and the fact that it built up this sort of network of spots, in parks, using the community to make and evaluate these spots. It has that entire network. So that's really what you're buying when you buy Niantic, is you have all this stuff mapped out in worldwide. I assume there's millions, maybe billions of points of interest across the earth. And that's what you get, so you could potentially, make new games. But like I said, Niantic, I think Monster Hunter Now was a good game. I don't think it was super popular because I don't exactly know why, because personally I think it was really good. But Pokemon Go reached insane levels of success and sort of cultural. What's the word for it? It became like a cult hit, a cultural changing hit where where the mainstream media is covering Pokemon Go stories and people walking off cliffs because of Pokemon Go. It just had it reached that level that it was actually causing real world issues. That's that level of success has not been duplicated, and I don't see Niantic being able to duplicate it again. I just don't know what kind of IP could do that. But we'll see. Saudi buying up more and more game companies. But let's switch over to a different story. So this is from Marvel Rivals. Director and team laid off, according to this post. So this was a post by Thaddeus Sasser. This is such a weird industry. My stellar, talented team helped deliver an incredible successfully new helped deliver an incredibly successful new franchise in Marvel Rivals for NetEase Games, and we were laid off. Oh well, times are tough. Let's find these incredible people new jobs because we all need to eat right. I'm going to start with the inspiring Gary McGee. During the course of the project, Gary was fantastic to work with. This is a highly technical designer, currently working in level design, and I've seen his passion project, who is a proactive problem solver. A lot of times, our project was spent as a sort of R&D branch, coming up with new level design mechanics, gameplay mechanics, and so on. Gary was a key part of those efforts. His technical ability, proactivity, and passion for the game development and problem solving were a huge asset to the team. Gary doesn't wait for a problem, just blah blah blah, slow him down. So he helped level design tools and gameplay mechanics. I can't tell you about because they belong to NetEase, but they greatly accelerated the team and often enabled the team's progress. And he's a nice person too. Yada yada. So I mean, the people that laid it off were doing stuff for the company. So it's kind of weird. This is Jack Burrows, level designer for Marvel Rivals. Hey folks, well, got laid off from my job working on Marvel Rivals with NetEase. It's an enormous pleasure to work with my American coworkers who joined me in the sad culling. Just couldn't dodge the big boot, I guess, no matter how big the success of the gig. So, like, Marvel Rivals had millions and millions. I think it still has millions of people playing it. So it was kind of surprising to see how quickly they got laid off. And people are like speculating, what could this have been? And this is their response from NetEase. We recently made the difficult decision. I always like, it's such a difficult decision, but we're doing it anyway. To adjust Marvel Rifle's development team structure for organizational reasons and to optimize development efficiency for the game. This resulted in a reduction of the design team based in Seattle that is part of a larger global design function in support of Marvel Rivals. We appreciate the hard work and dedication of those affected, and we'll be treating them with confidentially and respectfully with recognition for their individual contributions. We want to reassure our fan base that the core development team for Marvel Rivals, which continues to be led by lead producer Wei Kong Wu and video game director Guangyun Shen in Guangzhou, China, remains fully committed to deliver an exceptional experience. Wow. So basically, and this is just my theory, the Seattle team gave them what they wanted, and they decided that they didn't need to pay their salaries anymore. Like, hey, we thanks for delivering this game. We don't need you anymore. We'll just continue to pull out updates. Put out updates for the game, strictly moving it all to China because we're Chinese and we're cheap as hell. So why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we just stab you in the back, essentially, to save a few pennies? It makes sense to me. So yeah, I think that's the real reason, is that most of the devs are in China. It's owned by NetEase. They're all in China. This team, they got some expertise from the team to launch it. The Seattle team that was fairly small, but now that the game's launched, it's doing well. They decided, hey, let's cut cost and get rid of them. Boom. They're now like in the phase where it's just like new update time, and who knows, like if they, if they need some more stuff to like develop a bigger expansion or a bigger update, maybe they'll go out and get some other people. Who knows? But that, that kind of sucks. It's amazing that you can put out a massively successful game and still get laid off, but when you work with China, I guess that's what happens. This was a really fun story that, unfortunately, this interview with this guy, this is what got blown out of proportion. Jim Ryan forced Suhei Yoshida to take the PlayStation indie roles Shuhita says, I had no choice. It was take that job or leave the company. And then people got very mad because a lot of people aren't super happy with Jim Ryan. He's made some bad decisions. He was like really big on pushing for live service, which hasn't been popular among a lot of people. And of course, Concord, well, didn't do too well. So I'm kind of seeing it as a failure here. And this is another thing that's Shuhei Yoshida was reportedly told to accept any role or leave the company. Ultimatum was brought by Jim Ryan, who replaced Shu with Herman Holtz. Yoshida moving from first party indies. Well, I had no choice. Shuhida's department from the head of the worldwide studios kicked off the live service era. So people holding a grudge against Jim Ryan and Herman Holtz for that. And this is I love pop-ups. This was by Games Beat. This was an interview that was done that this excerpt was taken from. I have some notes here that I thought it was kind of fun to go over it because this is a cool. It was a cool interview that kind of told you the story of Sony and some of the interesting, sort of obstacles that come through game development and working on new stuff and new technology. So I thought it'd be fun to go into it. Let me just take a drink. Revenge. So this was revenge in a toy at the time. Ken Kutari seeking revenge against Nintendo. If you don't know the story behind this, Sony was working with Nintendo to make a game console that involved CDs, and this is sort of infamous because what came out of it. Once they reneged on the deal, Sony ended up making PlayStation, which is a very big competitor to it, and Nintendo ended up having the Philips CD, which is just notoriously awful, the games that were produced for it. Just stuff that was like retconned out of history. If you've ever looked up, Zelda CD, the Zelda CD games, or CDRs, or whatever they're called, or like the Mario ones, they basically get, memed out of like crazy from, YouTube poops. That it's, yeah. It ended up it's one of these like Nintendo super fail type of things, historical levels of failure, as it did not work out for them. So seeking revenge against Nintendo for reneging on an agreement to work with Sony on a game console, pitched and won approval for creating the Sony PlayStation. Yoshida didn't believe Kutari could pull off his plan to do a workstation level 3D graphics on a $500 game console. But his former boss urged Yoshida to join, and he took the plunge into the unknown. Yoshida became one of the first 80 people to work on the PlayStation. The system debuted in 1994 in Japan and 1995 in the US. It turned out to be a huge hit, and Yoshida had to create a deck to impress Kutari's bosses. Some people viewed the PlayStation and this was kind of the interesting part, viewed it as a toy that would tarnish the Sony brand. Yoshida pitched the PlayStation as the world's first virtual reality system. Once Sony moved forward, Yoshida had to convince Japanese game developers and publishers to make games for the system. So to me, this is crazy to think. But I mean, when you think back, like nowadays, you look, video games are everywhere. Everyone's like, yeah, video games make a ton of money. It's just, an accepted part of the media landscape. But back in the day, there were people at Sony like, hey, this is a toy. Sony made these like sleek, video, they made like video players, televisions, these sound systems, these really sleek, high-end sound systems for people. Why are you making like a toy for this? So this is how video games were looked at. They were looked at as toys. So the fact that you had to like try and like pitch it as a virtual reality system, because I guess that was a super hot, tech, futuristic tech type of stuff, is how we had to like market this to people as. And this the potential new business, one of which was assigned to each of them. I wasn't assigned to Ken's project, but one of my colleagues was. He wasn't a gamer. I was advising him about which companies to look at, and this is Shuhei talking here. He wasn't a gamer. I advised him to which companies to look at. If it's 3D, you should talk to Namco. things like that. I was a huge video game fan. Our boss at headquarters remembered so that I knew about games. Years later, when I was working at the PC department on notebooks, I got a call from him. He said I should meet with this guy, Ken Futari. I met him, and Ken explained what he was working on. At the time, Silicon Graphics workstations were thousands of dollars. He said, I'm making a video game system that with the same power as a workstation. We'll sell it for $500. I said, well, that's great, but I didn't actually believe him. I went back to my old boss and said, Ken has to be lying. He said, no, seriously, I believe him. So I said, let me in. That's how I joined Ken's team in February of 1993. The interesting thing is 2 weeks after I joined Ken's team, he came in as Ken's boss. He was gathering people he knew that he thought he could use. It's amazing. He's like, nah, there's no way that you can make that for $500. He's like, nah, they could do it. Like, I'm in, guys. So Shuhei was always like a big video game fan from the start. So I put together a presentation saying that PlayStation would be the world's first virtual reality system. It's so funny that, guys, it's virtual reality system. It's not a console. This is what it's like. Namco was advertising Red Racer as a virtual reality experience. This isn't a video game. It's a virtual reality. It's so funny. Guys, it's not a video game. It's how I often forget, because it's been so long, that video games were looked down upon very heavily at the time. Virtual reality was a buzzword at the time. That was my first assignment. But my real job was to talk to publishers and developers in Japan and recruit them to make games for the PlayStation. I made phone calls to every company from Hokkaido to Kyushu and put together a tour plan. I brought all the leaders together, and a group of us visited each company to pitch 3D graphics and movie-like features. Very movie-like, if you remember the PlayStation's cutscene. Most companies, especially companies making games for Super Nintendo, didn't get it. They thought 3D graphics would only work for shooters and racing games. The kind of games that we were making, they didn't think they could use 3D. The PlayStation didn't have background memory or sprites. They didn't know how to make games any other way. But a couple of companies really loved it. Namco had already been made a lot of 3D arcade games, and they couldn't leverage it in the consumer business. They thought the PlayStation would be a great outlet for their games. So Namco, big in the arcades at the time, is starting to work with them on the PlayStation that will eventually, kind of end their arcade business. Unknowingly, I guess, end arcades. But it is so funny to see the stories of how a lot of these developers weren't really gung-ho on new technology or, learning new systems and new technology or how to do new things. Which is kind of funny to think about. You'd always think, developers want to do the latest and greatest, but it's a lot of times, I guess, it's not the case. Some other, like this, so Namco proposed was amazing. They designed their own proprietary hardware boards for arcade games. They had their own hardware development and manufacturing. However, the executive responsible said, I'd like to just use PlayStation as our next arcade board. They asked us to create an arcade board version of the PlayStation and ship them. The first game they made with it was Tekken. They made Tekken, released it in the arcades. 3 months later, they released it for consoles. That was the shortest time they ever had been able to convert an arcade game to a console. That was their strategy. They became our biggest ally. So Tekken, a huge part, and Namco, a huge part of the PlayStation success, as they almost effortlessly moved from arcade to console, I guess using the PlayStation board in their arcades. Some other PC-based developers also has been experimenting with 3D graphics on computers like the Sharp X 68000. Was a popular hobbyist PC that had some 3D capabilities. You had a small company, independent teams making 3D games on the PC. They jumped on the PlayStation. Some of them was a team that made Jumping Flash. So we were able to find some allies, but most of the major companies other than Namco preferred to wait and see. So this is a lot. It took some convincing. It's always fun looking back in hindsight and saying, of course it was a success. Why not? But for a lot of people, it's a huge risk. Like I mentioned, the Philips CD that Nintendo going with, it was a monumental failure. stealing. So this is at the time. This was big because Square Enix was, or Square at the time, SquareSoft was making some of the best Super Nintendo games of all time. I mean, this was sort of the golden era, in my opinion, of Square. Was Super Nintendo. You had stuff like Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana. You had so many great games coming out, especially in the RPG department, from Square. So I became the lead account manager for Japanese publishers. Our goal was to get all major games in Japan to come out for the PlayStation. At the time, there were two big teams working with Nintendo, Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, and these were different companies at the time, I believe. I don't think Square and Enix had merged. Enix was making Dragon Quest for the Japanese audience, and those were the most popular games. When a new one came out, you had long lines of customers waiting to buy them. It made national news when a new Dragon Quest came out. There was controversies over kids calling out sick from school to stay home and play games. So Dragon Quest was like Madden at the time, or Halo back in the day. Of course, initially they weren't interested. They were close to Nintendo. But Hironobu Shaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy, loved the potential of CDs. His dream was to create a movie-like Final Fantasy game. He was disappointed when he learned that Nintendo 64 still used cartridges. His movies couldn't fit there. Squaresoft tried to convince Nintendo to change that plan, but they wouldn't. They didn't believe in CD-ROMs at all. Nintendo always sort of a late acceptor of new technology. That's why they licensed the Super Nintendo add-on project to Sony in the first place, because they believed CD-ROMs was just too slow to ever make a good game system. Well, that showed them. Our team, my boss, was a smoozer. He came from Sony Music. He hung out a lot with executives from Squaresoft, throwing parties at his apartment. Eventually, we were able to get Squaresoft to commit to PlayStation. They brought all their franchises from Nintendo to the PlayStation. Enix at the time was a separate company. They saw the move to PlayStation and decided to bring over Dragon Quest as well. So Squaresoft came over. Enix saw it and like, oh, what's happened over here? And they moved as well. They always want to release Dragon Quest on a console with the largest install base. So they were able to make the move. Getting Square and Enix was a huge win for PlayStation at the time. And I do remember that because I always loved, especially at the time when I was younger, I really enjoyed Square's games and their RPGs. Like I said, Chrono Trigger was amazing. Secret of Mana. All those such great games, and it was a big blow. Like, oh, they're going to PlayStation. Of course, we end up getting a PlayStation, so I played Final Fantasy VII on that anyway. But this was another interesting time that they were saved by flat screen TVs. Initially in Japan, the Sega Saturn was a very strong competitor. They had Virtual Fighter in the first year. The second year, they had Virtual Fighter 2. Those were popular among arcade games at the time until we announced Final Fantasy VII was coming out to the PlayStation. The Saturn was actually doing better. That was the most difficult time when we brought PlayStation to the US and Europe. They already had momentum. We announced that we were selling the system for $100 cheaper than Saturn, though. You see that pattern in different generations, like the 360 versus the PS3, and the Xbox One versus the PlayStation 4. That $100 makes a huge difference. So undercutting your competition by $100, it definitely helps. The US and European launches went very well. All the Japan launch titles were there. Plus, we had the US making sports games and European games like Wipeout. But the second year of the original PlayStation was very hard. It was very concerned. PlayStation 3 was another hard time. At the time, I was part of the management. I could see the financials. We were losing billions of dollars. I thought PlayStation was finished, but luckily, at the time, Sony's flat screen TVs were hugely popular. The TV group was making enough money to cover the losses from the PlayStation 3, and we were able to survive. So that's crazy that the PS3 was losing so much money that they were thankfully saved by flat screen televisions. But that was the most difficult time. Another one was the PSN outage. It lasted months. It's unbelievable how hard that was internally. And this is the sort of start. So again, crazy to think that PlayStation could have been finished if not for flat screen televisions being so popular. So Sony's other divisions making up for what the PS3 was losing. And this was another interesting thing that Sony, the start of the Sony Xbox console war. There was a CES dinner I went to. I also remember Ando-san was there. I asked him what he thought about Microsoft trying to get into the business with Xbox. He said that they had a nice launch, but by the time they sold their first unit, Sony had already sold 25 million PS2s. Of course, the PS2, one of the best-selling consoles of all time. That battle was almost over before Microsoft got started. So timing very important there. They launched very late. I remember the launch year of Xbox, the first one. Bill Gates came to Japan and did a keynote at the Tokyo Game Show. That showed they were serious. Part of what instigated them was Ken saying that the PlayStation, and this was really interesting. Ken said that the PlayStation was going to be the computer in the living room. That was the vision. Microsoft thought they were going to take the market away from them and decided they couldn't let that happen. So Microsoft coming in, I'm like, what? They want to make a computer in every living room? We can't let this happen. What's I think ironic is that the console never became the computer in the living room. What ended up happening was that we got computers in our pockets with a smartphone. Apple kind of came in and actually won that the real computer war. Of course, PlayStation the PlayStations and these consoles end up becoming like Netflix streaming devices rather than a computer itself. In a way, Ken created our own competition when he said that. Later, Ken wanted us to become something like Intel, making cell processor. In his mind, he was always thinking bigger than the games business. This is another interesting thing about technology and how they adapted it. So, GamesBeat asked, did you have your own feelings about the cell processor at the time? What I knew before the launch was it was a supercomputer chip. Very powerful, but everyone in the games team and the engineering team said it was very hard to make games with it. By that time, there was no programming for multiprocessor. The programming is had to divide the game programming into smaller chunks and keep all that programming work synchronized. It was very hard. Would it still be considered hard today that everything is multi-core? Yeah. The industry changed, but when PS3 launched, it was the first time many programmers have faced that. Our graphics hardware was less powerful than the 360 as well. The NVIDIA chip. Mark Cerny and the Naughty Dog engineers would use the cell processor, which was powerful but hard to use, to help render the graphics. Part of the CPU would do the GPU's job. That became our internal game engine. So it's amazing to think, like, when you first come out with some new technology, just how hard it is for it to adapt. I guess this is another advantage of Nintendo's strategy is by the time everybody else works out these, kinks and details, they can come in the next generation like, oh yeah, that's a cool technology. Let's use that. And then basically all the devs are used to working with it and everything's cool. It makes their job a lot easier. I remember when the Xbox group was starting up, one of the things American developers said was they got no information from the Japanese company. They get dev kits very late and all the documentation was in Japanese. And then Yoshida says, that's a funny story. I didn't know if this was been published before, talking to PlayStation, but we were launching in Japan first. We start to sign licensing contracts with publishers and developers and send out dev kits, but only in Japan. Mark Cerny visited us and asked for a dev kit. I told him, no, we're only signing contracts for the Japanese developers right now. He said, well, can I become a Japanese developer? I said, sorry, we only have contracts written in Japanese. He said, that's no problem. Give me one. The next day, he came back with his signature on it. Crystal Dynamics, his U.S. company, became the first company with a dev kit. And Crystal Dynamics, famous for making the Tomb Raider series, which, hey, that worked out well for him. Later on, he told me what he had done. He hadn't consulted with the headquarters at all. He had just signed the deal himself and came back to the office with it. That caused some problems later on, but that's how we got our first dev kit for an American company. He could read Japanese, of course. He'd worked for Sega in Japan, worked with Yuji Naka to make Sonic the Hedgehog. He was able to take advantage of that. That's pretty funny. And this was the quote that everybody picked up on and everyone got mad about. And unfortunately, like it wasn't like evil Jack Ryan forcing him to make indies. It's essentially when he got kind of moved out of his job, there wasn't a job for him. So it's either A, he has to quit, which is what would have been the option, but Jim Ryan ended up creating a spot for him to keep him in the company, essentially. So, GameSpeed asked, why did you actually retire? Yoshida says, well, I haven't retired. I left the company. Jim Ryan was the last leader of our generation. Ken Katori, this is kind of weird what he says about, generations. Ken Katori, Kaza Ahiri, Andrew House, Sean Layden, myself, we were all the same group from the PS1 days. We handed down to the next generation of management. Like this, again, it's really weird to see, like, you know what, my time's over, time to leave the company, rather than, boomers holding on to power forever, which you seem to see in America. But maybe that's more of a Japanese thing, cultural thing. Like Hideki Noshio and Herman Holtz. For the last 5 years, my responsibilities were to promote indie games inside and outside PlayStation. I wanted to communicate, especially to new people joining PlayStation, how important it was to support indie games. They create the future. Internally, I was communicating to indie developers and publishers that we wanted to make things better for them. Bit by bit, we were able to improve our system, our store functions, our communications. So it's cool to see that he realizes that indies right now is, where people innovate. They make new stuff, like new game types, and the fact that they're committed to helping these people out is really cool. A few years back, one of the reasons I got the job from Jim, we've been criticized by the indie community. They said PlayStation doesn't care about indies. You don't hear that kind of criticism anymore. Last year, we had a lot of anecdotes about our indie partners. Their new games were selling better on PlayStation than any other platform. That's amazing. Some games sold better on PlayStation than PC. When I started that work 5 years ago, our indie partners would say that when they released their games multi-platform, the Switch version would sell 3 to 5 times more than PlayStation. Yeah, Switch has definitely kind of cemented itself as like a great indie platform. People just walking around, they can just play on their couch. It does work very well for indies. Bit by bit, that gap has narrowed down. We have a strong team inside the company supporting indies. When I got the job, I told Jim I didn't want to create a department. There's enough verticals in the company. Coordinating department is hard already. I don't want to create another vertical. My personal goal when I started the indie job was to make the position obsolete. The company would be doing so well that there's no need for someone like me to tell everyone that this was important. I feel like we've achieved that pretty well. There's a lot we can do, but people working on it. You had the combination of Jim leaving and Noshido and Herman stepping up. I felt good about the state of our support for indies. I decided to leave. So he's like, I've been here long enough. It's time for me to move on, which is kind of cool. Did you face any handing from the developers? Did you face any personal challenges handing some of the biggest developers over to others to deal with? And then you went to focus on the smallest game companies. And this is the quote. Moving from first party indies, well, I had no choice. When Jim asked me to do the indies, the choice was to do that or leave the company. But I felt very strongly about the state of PlayStation indies. I wanted to do this. I believed I could do something unique for that purpose. That was the bigger change for me personally. Moving from first party indies, then leaving the company this year. I'm very lucky that the indie community, the publishers and developers I worked closely with, they believed that they could use my help. I became an advisor for some of these companies. I continued to work with some of the indie publishers. I respect the transition out of Sony became an independent advisor is less of a change than moving out of first party. And let me just move on here. There is more stuff, and he's going to continue to work as an advisor for indies, which is very cool. There was another interview with Colin Moriarty, and just some notes I took from it. That one thing he mentioned is that the Japanese market is insanely small, and Sony does not seem to really care too much about it. Like only 10% of their sales come from Japan. And I mean, Japan is a small, very small country, but they've always been very interested in video games. So the fact that it's only 10% is crazy, and the fact that Again, they're not like, it's 10%. You know, it's not something that they specifically focus on. It's kind of wild. He also complained about how the Jack Ryan Moon, the Indies, got, played out on the news. You know, that's what the journalists decided to pick up and run with, that he was forced out by Jack Ryan. He said that he was happy to do the indie job. It was a fun thing for him to do, and he thought it was important. The other thing that he mentioned is that funding AA games is actually really hard because they're kind of like in the middle where, it's not like an indie, which has a very small budget, kind of like mid-sized budget, and the costs right now are just too high. It's either you got to go big with like a big AAA game that's going to sell like millions upon millions, or you need to go to an indie, which is kind of bizarre. Especially, I think the problem is that they never want to sell them for a certain price. You know, they never want to sell them for like $40. You know, like kind of like what they did with Helldivers. It's always like, here's a AAA game, AA game for like $60 or $70. Like I think that's one of the issues someone was mentioning with like Avowed. Avowed feels like a AA game, but they want to charge $70 for it because it doesn't have a lot of these technical chops that like something like Skyrim had back in the day. Not a lot of interaction. It's fairly bare bones in terms of like the NPCs don't move around. They don't have like walk cycles, day night cycles. They just sort of stay there. A lot of people are saying, it's an all right game. It's just not a $70 game. So that could be one of the issues why Valve's not doing super well. And then he also mentioned the increased cost development made exclusives less viable, and putting things on PC has proven not to eat profits away from Sony. Though he didn't specifically say about releasing stuff, day and date, which means releasing them simultaneously PC and PlayStation. He mentioned like, releasing it later on PC has just been an absolute win. It's just more money for them. It's nothing that, it's nothing that they think, takes away from their profits. It just adds to their profits. So the days of exclusivity may be ending for consoles. At this point, I think I'm just going to skip over the other two interviews. This took longer than I wanted, and talk about the game of the week. I'll have to add those next time. There's a cool interview about Diablo where he thinks they're going in the wrong direction, and there's also an Akami interview that I thought was kind of interesting. But let's go over. This is a demo that came out recently. This is called Touhou Maoka Sai. And I've had, as you've known, let me see, I can just move over to the countdown here. And you guys are familiar, I've used this as my countdown for quite a while. This is Maoka Sai 2. This is one based off of Perfect Cherry Blossom. This one is Touhou Maoka Sai 3. This is based off shit. I can't remember the name for it. What it's based off of. Something Phantom. Oh, the Imperishable Night, I think, is what the original is called. But this just came out, and it is honestly one of the best looking shoot 'em ups I've played. I haven't played like a ton of shoot 'em ups, but this is one of the best. Let me see if I can turn down the volume a little bit, and let's get into it. I'm just like looking over some stuff. Like I really like as you can see, the art style for the characters has a really nice flavor to it. I really like this sort of like painted style that they went with the characters for. It's quite nice. It's kind of like a little like blurred. It's not like super hard lines. It's very soft. The selection, everything's just done with a great level of detail. And here I'm just kind of working stuff out. And like, if you remember Immortal Manual, talking to it where I said like it didn't have like a really good or a really tight theme, all of this has every stage itself is really tight, and how the theme and its color palette, it's really good. Like this, and if you see here, like as you kill the enemies, especially the bigger enemies, you can see the like lantern and the wings. When they explode, they kind of explode in a special like sprite for it. It's not just a generic, not just a generic explosion or effect. It's very personalized, and it's hard to notice. Like you can see like the clothing and because it just like explodes into shreds. It's a really cool, subtle detail that the small details often like make a big difference in the presentation of it. And overall, the stage has a lot of really like green and yellow. The bottom of the stage looks very nice. The background. And you can see all these fireflies in the background, which will eventually become enemies. I really love when the background tells, a little story. Gives you a preview of what's coming. And like these signs, like the spell cards are a huge part of Toho. And as you can see, when Nightbug comes in here, they have like a little like effects that pop up along with the character portrait. There's a lot of unique sprites that are used in these attacks that really make them seem unique. Along with, again, a lot of like stars. It's like a nighttime theme, so I got a star-shaped attacks. Have the fireflies coming in. Let's move on ahead to the actual fight with the first boss here. And they change up the attacks. They have like a lot of different bullets, but they all fit together. Nothing seems really out of place, which was one of my issues with the Mortal Manual. I got these like little like things that pop up. I don't know what those would be. It almost looked like fruit. But they have a special animation when they're destroyed. A lot of like stars are an important part of the theme. Let me show some more like spell cards here. The game's just absolutely gorgeous. So like look, all these like lines that they do in the designs are like kind of looks like a tree. Just overall just a gorgeous looking game. But it still feels, they do like a lot of untraditional stuff, but it feels really good. It doesn't seem out of place. Let me show the next stage. This stage was my overall favorite of the demo, just in terms of how it looks and its theme. I'm not super into like the horror, but the fact that how well it looks is it's just phenomenal. Because they have like this really like blue, deep blue in the background. They have like almost like bluish white along with the red and black. It looks really great. You can see like the little like bushes here of red. They just made it look very good. The sort of creepiness of it. You have these like Japanese, I don't know if they're lanterns or whatever you want to call them. They shoot out the sort of fire coming out of it. And then a ton of unique sprites. You have the skulls, you have those like moths popping out. You have this like weird demon lady shooting out like this blood. Snake head lady. Sort of stuff popping out. Again, like as it explodes, it has a unique explosion for when it dies. And then I love this part. You have the wind and the lanterns lighting up. It's so good. And like you're trying to like observe this as you're dodging a ton of bullets. Is there a way to speed this up? I guess not. There's a ton of different effects. They got a special system, like as you get hit, you can expend 2 bombs to not lose a life, which is nice. But it also, I guess one of the criticisms I see of the game is that it's a little on the easy side, but the harder difficulties haven't been released. There's 2 harder difficulties that are not in the demo. But as you can see here, like the lasers, if you remember the lasers in the like I said in the Immortal Manual, were kind of difficult to see. The fact that they do these small details, like they start as transparents and they sort of come into, like as you can see them start to come into visibility. It starts on the outside and sort of solidifies into place. It gives you a lot more time to react, and you can see as like that gets thinner and more defined, that's the indicator that's about to hit, which makes it feel a lot easier to dodge, and it's a lot clearer. It's a lot clearer about communicating where the hitbox on the attack is, which is something I feel like you need to do if you're going to use like more unique and different bullets. You know, rather than like a bullet hell, it's having lasers. You need to communicate very well. Again, more stuff breaking in the background. You need to communicate like what you have to avoid and what you don't have to. And like these weird, creepy skeleton ladies shooting out these long streams of things. I guess these umbrellas are supposed to be like a demon in Japan. I really like this bullet effect. It's quite pretty. The red, black, and white. Like I said, all of these things have very strong themes in it. And look visually stunning. And then they made their own like giant sprite work is awesome. The hand-drawn sprites. Everything in this game looks phenomenal. I don't know what the artist did, but they did so much work on this too. Yeah, yokai, Japanese demon. The way all these things look, it's so good. Like I said, this is one of the best looking, if not the best looking, shoot 'em up I've seen. Just the quality of the artwork and how crisp it is. Because like a lot of the older shoot 'em ups are, you know, older games that was released in the height of shoot 'em ups. They're not made for high definition TVs here, like high definition monitors. But all this stuff looks fantastic. Let's see. They got like a little story, but it's whatever. It's not that important. Again, I mentioned the non-traditional things. The fact that it starts really transparent and gets more opaque as it's about to fire off. It's such a great way to communicate, you know, where it's happening, and give you time to sort of move. Because I think the idea of like the lasers, these lasers aren't to like hit you; it's to restrict you to an area. And you know that, and then you have to dodge these bullets in that restricted area. But just all the colors, the color themes in these things, and the bullets, they fit so well together. I think this is what, Toho. I don't know. I haven't played enough Toho to say like it's the essence of Toho, but this seems to be like such a great place that Toho fits in this sort of ecosystem of shoot 'em ups. It's like this is the like sort of really beautiful anime style shoot 'em up. Like I said, like all these like the sound effects, the overall thematics of these lines sort of restricting your movements. It's like a sort of sense of dread. Works out really well. Like every character boss you fight has its own theme. With this, kind of like being like some sort of like creepy, like blood-stained killer. A lot of different like lines, stuff coming out. It's really awesome. And like, let me move on to the last boss here. I really like the boss too. I think this stage is probably one of my favorite, or probably is my favorite of the demo. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the other. It should probably have 6 stages. What the other 6 stages are gonna bring. Because this looks great. I got like the blood theme, the extra like blood splashing across the screen as it has a sign, as it like showing off its spell card. It's all the little effects in this. They went the extra mile to make it look good. Like this is a very cool. Like they make like those sort of like creepy, kind of like gooey, sound effect there as it goes off. Sort of like some like blood, like pus or something like trying to blow up. It looks great. It looks fantastic. And the last boss here showing off. It's sort of like a bamboo theme. We sort of have to invade this. These bunch of like these rabbit girls have this fort set up that you need to break into. So they got different what's the word? Crossbows or ballistas set up. Like they're flying across as like little like ninjas throwing shurikens. That's the other thing I want to mention. If you look at the shurikens, you can see like how a lot of these bullets are not static. They'll have like different effects on it, like they shine, they pulsate as they fly across, and it gives them a really like a lively feel to it. Like even if you notice, not to go back too much, but you see like these bullets, the yellow bullets, the way they rotate, and like even as they explode, they have a unique effect going away, but it gives them, or even like these, they sort of pulsate as they fire down at you. It gives it like a sort of energy. It makes it look intense and like alive in a way. Like alive, not in the sense that it's alive, but you kind of get what I'm saying. It has an energy to it that I think definitely adds to the look of the game. Let me go back to the bamboo forest here. So you break through this bamboo forest, and the final boss is of the demo is this rabbit girl. It's like has like a mochi theme to her. I really like this thing. I'm not able to dodge it all, but like it kind of like creates a maze that you have to move your character through. And I'm hitting several times here because I'm trying to focus dodge instead of just dodge, raw dodge it, which is off. I think that one's very fun. You have to like go through here, and they speed up. They have like a little like section here, which this looks a lot more complicated than it is. It's just tap dodging through this, and you're fine. You can see like even they put like the fire effect here to make it look more intense. Stuff flying through, and eventually you get to. Let's just look at all the sprite work they put in here, like the little like wood scaffolding, the lanterns, all this detail put into the background of the thing. Even like they have like a little like ceiling that you blow apart, and then you have to blow apart the ballista. It's great. All these little details, they just did a phenomenal job of making it look really good. Let's move on to the boss here. This was like kind of like a mini boss. You have to blow up this floating, giant floating thing, and you get to the boss here. There's a lot of cool spell cards. and she shoots out mochi. So all of her spell cards have this like mochi looking theme. Of course, she also has the support from the other people in the so they made like bullets with like rabbits. They have like a lot of unique bullet shapes rather than just having, you know, circles and those sort of other things, which looks really good. Turtle Town. This was a kind of a unique effect where it freezes you in place. You have to shake your controller to break out before these things eat you. Again, they like have animation of these giant mochi like rabbits with big teeth trying to eat. We have to also dodge the bullets themselves. It's a lot of fun. And they do it again. So thematically, they just have these great. And then like in between the spell cards, you also have the other rabbits supporting them, supporting her to fight you off. And this is kind of like a weird, the arc and like the after trail make it a little difficult to dodge. It kind of like fools your eyes. Again, very cool. And the final one, final spell card is it's enjoyable, but I can't dodge it worth a crap. You have to kind of like, you're supposed to like weave in between these rotating things. If you don't go fast enough, you end up getting trapped. Like I need to get through that gap right there, but I don't. Luckily, my bomb finishes it off. But that is the demo right there. That's only 3 stages, but like I said, a fantastic looking game. It's the demo's free, so you can check it out if you're interested in trying a Toho game for yourself. And it's actually exceptionally. If they have easy, normal, hard, this was hard. So the easy I haven't played, but I assume it's exceptionally easy. The easy modes are always in the Toho games especially tend to be extremely easy. So if you want to like sort of get into the genre, it's a very mild way to start it, you know. And then, like work your way up to more intense bullet hells. But this game, like I said, probably the best looking shoot 'em up I've seen in the game. If you like the sort of anime aesthetic, and just overall the aesthetics of the bullets, it looks really, really good. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the full game has to offer. But guys, that's it. That's it for the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's see here. Let me see if I can find Rule 0. I think it's going to be on Kyle, or Post 0. It's going to be on Kyle's channel. Let's see what they got up. Let's see if I can find it. Post 0. Emotional manipulation. I think that's what I suggested as a theme. So that's going to be on Kyle's channel. I'll redirect you guys to that at 11. I'll be showing up there too as well. So be sure to check it out. Thank you guys, and appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't. We're almost to 700 subs now, which is going to be great. I'm looking forward to hitting that. It's just a matter of time at this point. Just a matter of time. Let's see if I can find how many do I have on my channel? I'm only 7 away from 700, so be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't. And I'll see you later, guys. We'll see you again. Like I said, I'm going to redirect to that, and I'll see you there. Bye-bye.